Hey guys, let's start.
In times like these, being a citizen is a big job. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the virtues of self-rule and debate the state of our republic. Welcome to the Citizens Prerogative Podcast. This is the voice of your nerdy host, Michael Piscitelli, and we are blessed with a co-host whose passion for our republic precedes him everywhere he goes, Raymond Wong Jr.
Ah, well, hello, grazie.
This is episode 12, and we are in season 2. The name of this episode is The Freedom Contract. And we have a few topics on the docket today. Some things we want to do is just recap some ideas that we had from season 1, the foundation season, because they're ideas that we're going to continue to refer back to throughout season 2 and however many episodes end up showing up in your stream here. So the first one we want to revisit is the car metaphor. And we want to make sure that people...
we want to make sure that people remember to refer back to what we like to call the videos or anything we have from the past as our archive. So we'll always be available. We'll always look back to those to try to understand what we've said or expand, explain, or evolve what we've said in the past.
Thank you, Ray. So the first topic that we want to explore a little bit deeper is the car metaphor. And Ray and I were talking a little bit about this metaphor before we started recording this particular episode, because we realized how much we both feel it's really useful for the information we like to share between, among one another and to share out there with all of you. And so we've refined the metaphor a little bit, and I just want to review where we are landing with it at this point. And this will be the foundation that we're using rolling forward with the car metaphor. So for those of you who may just be joining us and haven't listened to all of season 1, the car metaphor is what we use to talk about the republic and our economy and the system that we live in the United States in more of an abstract way. And it's very, it's a very tangible, very accessible idea. I mean, generally, majority of Americans are very familiar with the concept of an automobile. So just to break down the metaphor at a high level, because we're only reviewing it here, we'll move on to talking other topics here shortly. The first piece of the car metaphor we want to relate in is the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution is the blueprint for our system of governance, inspired by the Declaration of Independence. And it's a blueprint for, we're going to use it in the same context, a blueprint for how to build a car, the design, the DNA of how the car is going to look, how it's going to function, the features it's going to have, etc. So our constitution's our blueprint. We have Congress. We consider Congress the factory for the republic because it's where all the lawmaking happens, and it's through rule of law that we set up institutions and we operate things around here. The republic itself, as a whole institution, we feel is representative by the frame of the car, the chassis of the car. It is the singular many unit component that, when assembled together as one, holds the whole superstructure together and holds all the components of the structure within it. So it's very critical. Like, we don't have a country. I don't know how we have economy. We don't have anything without rule of law, and we don't have the republic. And then the engine, pretty self-explanatory. People understand when we equate that to the economy. We always refer to the economic engine of things. So that's not a stretch to anybody's imagination, I hope. And the driver of this car is the citizens who vote. Because citizens who vote exercise their ability to turn the steering wheel or push on the accelerator stick or depress the brake pedal or whatever terminology is in your local DMV manual. And then there's passengers in the car. What car doesn't have passengers? Well, don't answer that question. It's rhetorical. But the passengers in the car represent all of those citizens out there who don't vote. the silent majority, if you will. The people who may or may not be registered, but otherwise would be eligible to vote and choose not to exercise that right, that responsibility, that obligation. And so they're not in the driver's seat. Did I miss anything, Ray?
No, I mean, it's perfectly given representation of the democracy. I just don't know if there's a better way to describe it. I mean, a vehicle is made of 2,000 parts on average. Okay, if you imagine the complexity it takes to build a vehicle, all that goes to make that all work in unison so that these vehicles work for thousands of miles without a hitch, some better than others. And that's the point of the democracy, right? Not all vehicles are created equal. Not all democracies or republics are created equal. So I like this ideal of the framework, which is built by the so Constitution is the blueprint, and then you have Congress, who is this factory that's supposed to build us a drivable car. So our question to the citizen and ourselves, is this the quality of car I need for my family, for my friends, and for people to feel safe? Do I feel safe in my car? Not so sure right now.
Thank you. So that's going to cover the car metaphor for now. We'll be using it and referring back to it quite frequently, so we don't want to belabor it. The other thing we want to bring up before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode is around the current state of the contract. And when I say the contract, I'm referring back to the title of the episode, the freedom contract. And freedom is a contract. Freedom is a contract between the governed and those who govern, those who are governed and the people who govern those individuals. We operate under self-governance, and that contract's become pretty warped with, we in previous episodes, we talked a little bit about wealth and capital and, all of those things, some of the forces that are operating against or with the Republic and us as individuals just trying to pursue happiness, right? And so in all of that is a contract. And in many ways, the contract right now is unfair. It's unequal. In a lot of ways, it always has been, right? That's the promise of this country, is to actually come out with a system that is everyone playing by the same set of rules. So some of the things we just want to revisit, we're not going to go into detail only because we have espoused on these. We've gone into detail a little bit already in these areas, and it's not what we're covering in particular today, but it's useful to have these things in mind as we move forward in the discussion. So some of the ideas we want to raise about the current state of the contract that we have is that there are inequities abound everywhere. They're born into the custom American monopoly game that's been baked into our system. The rules in our game are rigged to benefit the current winners. And that type of rigging, that kind of backroom dealing has been going on for a very long time. And it's something we have to continue to move away from. We've also got an issue in the contract where it's set up to hold others back. It's making available a separate and unequal version of something labeled education, for instance. All just, depending on where you live. And people are like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it because of property taxes. Well, that's the system we set up. So we've learned from that system, and now time to change it. There's also inequities around who's entitled to live in this country, who's entitled to have a right to their life in this country. And we see these reflected in stand your ground, a stand your ground defense that's basically very inequitable. We earned it, we deserve it, so we can keep this thing no matter what. doesn't make any sense. And then on the opposite side of things, they feel, whoever those people are, they feel like they can run others down, in some case using state power or authority. And these two last points feel nebulous, right? What am I talking about for real? But it's this idea that people deserve what they earned because they did it completely on their own. And that's a lie. Because if anybody's earned anything in this country, it's because this country exists. It's because the system exists. It's because the rule of law has been established here in order for them to actually have achieved that thing. It's not because they were born naturally deserving or capable of acquiring all of that. And then the run others down, it's like, we've seen that recently in the sense that some people are allowed to riot and others aren't. Which also is that disparity behind policing, right? Why are some people, why do the police feel like they can deprive a certain group of people of life more often than others?
If you think about what happened in the Capitol as an incident and of running others down. So the state didn't even have to lift a finger. And that's the problem, is that the state had control of the floodgates of people and they just decided to let it flow. So it's technically by inaction, they allowed the Capitol building to be run down. And that was one branch of the government attacking the other, in essence, right? For lack of a better word there. And this is stand your ground defense, where people believe that they've earned it, right? You hear that a lot from leadership in the corporate space. I heard it because I've always been a controversial employee. But leaders would tell me all the time, we're in this position for a reason. We're here for a reason. And to me, you don't have to say things like that if you're in a leadership position, right? If you're genuinely in a position, you don't say
Your
that you're there.
actions should show
Right.
what you're there
Action
for.
show. Right. And that's the truth there. And so we've got a serious disconnect there. But I think you're absolutely right. Those two last comments about stand your ground, defense of inequity, saying that others can get it, they just have to try. It's not true. It's not true. That doesn't. The fact of the matter is that there are different mechanisms that help you get there. It's a community effort that gets people to where they go. That's what it is. When people say I did it all by myself, I upset small business owners and independent contractors all the time, because every time they tell me I don't want a boss, I always tell them, well, who pays you? Are they not your boss? And they always are a little, well, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm glad that argument works on a lot of people and they're impressed, but you still have a boss. It's the economy. Stupid. That's what I meant to say, Mike. And all that, I was agreeing. It's the economy, stupid. We're subject to it. It's our boss.
We are all, whether we want it or not, we're all in a system where we're serving something. We're serving some kind of purpose. Like if we're in a particular role, like you're talking about, people operating businesses, even if you work at a corporation or something like that, that business is a perfect example. The customer, at the end of the day, they are beholden to the tastes, preferences, and whims of their customers. And that's why, the relationship with customers is so important, because that's make it or break it for you when you're operating a business. So that's your boss at the end of the day, right? You want people to give you money. Well, that's who you're beholden to in that sense. And so at the end of the day, we should all be looking at those connections to our communities in and around and among us, because we all have them. I mean, freedom is a specific thing. It is not for you to make up whatever you want. You don't get to declare yourself free of anything, because guess what? We've already got the law. The law tells us what our freedoms are. And we can change it if we want it to be different, but it's we who has to change it for all of us, as we all live under it. So please
And,
don't ever feel like, yeah, it's all you, only you. Go ahead.
and so the state being mechanized, one more piece for the state to run you down. We've spoken a lot throughout the first season about pay to play. And that's the big issue here, folks, is that if you become successful, any rising star corporation, individual, et cetera, politician, you have to face the others that will use the state to run you down. The pay to play mechanism of the state, where you have these large corporations who are in the government because they've been paying for years. So when they call and say, hey, I'm a little concerned about regulation in this space because there's small players trying to take my business, guess what? They have a voice because they've been paying to play. That can't be the way our government runs anymore. Just because you send a check to this politician every year for the last 20 years, you get to call and shut down your competitor, because that's what's happening.
Oh, the current state of the contract is rigged. People are pissed for a good reason. Unfortunately, that anger is being misdirected intentionally because
Harnessed. It's being harnessed, right?
It's being harnessed and redirected. It's like what Tai Chi, or I don't know, one of those martial arts where you use your enemy's energy against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mortal Kombat. We're in the middle of this Mortal Kombat, and you see that. And I know that I feel like you and I speak in such urgency throughout season 1, but now we see this culmination with the Capitol under siege, and you see why it's so important. This fact about this idea of you stand your ground, and you, just because you feel it personally, that others have to follow it. Like, that's where people lose it. Like, that's not freedom. Freedom is that you get to feel that way, not that you take action on other people's freedoms. You don't get to tell others how to live. There's a lot of people obsessed with controlling others. I'm convinced that there are nothing but these control freaks that want to control others. They spend all day obsessed about what others are doing instead of themselves.
Or they just want to tear everybody down because misery loves company.
That's true. All of the above, right? I shouldn't generalize. That's why we're here. We try not to generalize.
There were so many flags on that Capitol.
Yeah.
There was no
I
one.
like the Georgia flags, because people had the national flag of Georgia in Europe, not the Georgia state flag. So they weren't even from Georgia.
Oh,
it just was.
Yeah.
They had the national flag.
Yeah. The nation of Georgia. I wonder if
Yes.
that's. I wonder if. And now I want to go look into that. We'll talk about that later. But it makes me wonder if it's not necessarily maybe Nazi right wing, but also this vein of libertarianism that's a little bit perverse, that may be tracing back to Eastern Europe. It's been making the rounds recently. I've been picking up on some of the revolutionaries of Eastern Europe and how their good intention is, whatever their actions were is one thing and their intentions are another, and people taking those things and using them for their own purpose. But
wow, that implies that this group is deep.
Yeah.
With what you said, I'm willing to believe they just got the flag wrong.
They got the flag wrong. That's a different country,
That is
not the
deep.
state.
Well, yes. Oh, I
Well,
hope they're not thinking that deep, because then we're in trouble.
Well, no, it's not necessarily that anybody in particular was thinking deeply. It's somebody dug deeply and fed that, and that's what was available at the trough.
You're right. You're right.
That's what I'm kind of thinking. I want to go back and see, wait a minute, what kind of, what crazy philosophy is being hijacked now for this insane, deranged set of who knows what mission, what purpose. People want to say anarchy. Anarchy is actually can be a very constructive thing, and we'll talk about that at some point. But yeah, I think it's just to tear everything down because misery loves company. We'll see. Well, they just want to be taken seriously too, I guess. I don't know. Let's not get in their heads.
I watched the American president which of course is a great movie that I love because I needed to hear a presidential voice. And it's insane to me that the responses in there were you needed that. You kind of needed this response because there's a part where the president, the actor president, says that you blame a bunch of middle-aged people for their lot in life, and you tell them they're the ones to blame. And I was like, ooh, that hits a little close to home.
It's yeah, there's the echoes. It's like the game plan's been written and used many times.
But it finally backfired, right? The manipulation system has been there for age old. It's age old, right? But it finally blew up. But the question is I think people have egos, and that'll be the challenge, is that freedom requires that we nurture it. We don't nurture your ego. So that's what we're seeing going on in Capitol Hill now. It's ego versus freedom, just pure freedom.
I think it's about time for a word for our sponsor before we dig into the real topic.
Like I was feeling very sponsored at the moment. Thanks.
Fulfilling a dream where all possess an intrinsic love for self-rule that is reciprocated with free speech and equal justice under the law. Citizen Do-Good values all of the amendments of the Constitution along with the original core documents. It all forms a framework and an operating manual for the Republic, and it provides us with the means to change with our times. The time is now to deeply re-examine our current implementation of governance. We are at the dawning of a new day. We're a proud sponsor of the Citizens Prerogative Podcast, a major partner in spreading the good word about civic love and the power of change for us all. Help us stay on mission and grow this community by rating the podcast with 5 stars in your app. If you don't feel like you can give us 5 stars, let us know why on our sponsor's Facebook page, Citizen Do Good. Like the page to help out even further. Also, make sure you join our newsletter at citizendogood.com. You'll get updates every couple of months on all of our antics, not just the podcast. While you're there, check out the shop with your favorite merch, or maybe you can make a project contribution, add that to your cart. Feel free to share any suggestions you have directly through our Contact Us page. Thanks for your support. So, Ray, we talked a little bit about the current state. We reviewed the car metaphor. I should say the current state of the contract that we have as citizens in our system. Now, let's talk about how to evolve this system in response to changes in all of the environments. Everything's changing, it seems like, faster and in new and different ways. And I always try to find the silver lining in things. And I think some of the recent events, the only way to look at them as a new challenge, a new test to the experiment. We're going down a use case. We're going down the road of a use case that the founding fathers feared so much. They were so preoccupied with. And it's a fear that had kept this meritocratic professional political elite around the system for so long as much as possible. And yeah, there was political infighting, but at the end of the day, that group of people always knew they would all make it or break it by that set of rules. And as we've democratized things, right?
I have to jump in.
Go.
And we have to remind people is that the no president, first draft of our founding fathers of this great nation, this government, we will always remind people, or I will obnoxiously, is that there was no president in the first draft, because what Michael's saying is they were genuinely concerned about too much centralized power one individual doing what the current president did in 2020 and the 4 years prior. That's what they were worried about. And they didn't have a president in the first draft of our government. What does that say to you? And most citizens don't know that. And that's what being a responsible citizen is. You need to understand that the presidency was created out of what is it, Michael? Angst,
Yeah, it was a
resistance.
compromise. It was a compromise. It was seen as a king, that role. They didn't, we were, this country was founded to get out from underneath the oppression of living, under a king, an absolute ruler, an authority, what's the word? Ordained by God,
Yes.
even. So two things we didn't want. We wanted to create this country, and we didn't want it to fail like Rome, but we wanted to have democratic values. We wanted it to have the ability to change with time so that people didn't have to commit revolution every 4 years or 6 years or 20 years. Revolution is painful. So, and they didn't want a king, and they certainly didn't want a religious structure, power, authority, because there were many religions here, and there would be many more to come. So, yeah, it was a compromise to have a president, and it was really difficult to figure out, well, how would it be selected? I mean, one of the things that probably changed the most when you want to talk about voting early on is how they picked the president among them. It was quite controversial. I mean, this system has never really been pretty. It's never been pretty. And I don't think that's not the game we're playing. That's not the end result we're going for. Pretty is not it. Dictators are good at putting up pomp and circumstance and pretty. That's not what this is. This is self-rule, people. This is where freedom comes from. And it takes all of us.
Advanced citizenship.
Yeah. Yeah, now all I can think is we really need to dial back the authority of the executive branch as much as possible. And
Well, they technically don't have very much authority. They have very limited authority, and it's all perceived and authority of precedence, right? So the previous administrations have acted outside of their true authority, and the Congress has done nothing to claw
done
it
nothing.
back.
Yes.
So that's why we're here. So the
That's right.
Congress needs to take its action as an equal level. Do not act like a subordinate level of the judiciary has done its job. Okay, Congress needs to show up to the party as well and finally fight back.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to go, I don't entertain conspiracy theory, but one of the best ways to take out a republic like ours is to give the vote as many people as possible and teach them as little as possible. You want to show how a republic will fail. You want to show why democracy doesn't work. Then that's what you do. You take education, you give people a vote, and you take away their ability to understand how to use it. And then you're like, okay, well, now we're at the casino. We're just going to see what happens, rather than take it very seriously, the work of self-rule, and say, okay, well, we do want to be that shining hill, that shining city. We want to show the rest of our species how we can organize ourselves to be free and effective, for a future society. Well, that means we should be teaching everyone, how to participate in the system, teaching everyone civics, how to think, how to learn. Like, we would really invest in our citizens if we thought about things in that way, where we wanted to demonstrate the power, capacity, and true amazingness that a republic can have and democracy can bring. But we quarter asset.
Well, thank goodness the document is secure, right? It's the only good news at this very moment is that the Constitution remains intact. But the Republic, the vehicle that we're all driving, that we've been sold, that frankly has no power whatsoever, you have to roll it down a hill and then it slightly makes it up the other side of the hill with the push of our fellow Americans,
Pop
not
the
even through
clutch.
government help. Yeah, we need to pop the clutch to get it running, and then to get over the hill, we need the help of our neighbors. That's the republic that we're running right now, and that is what the government doesn't want to free us from. As long as we're busy pushing this republic up the hill constantly, which is the best metaphor I can think of, they they are looking at us and siphoning our tax dollars into pork barrel projects and contractor dollars and speaking fees at companies, right? So
Yep.
they're just lining their pockets off of us.
Oh, they still haven't noticed? Okay, keep doing it. Oh, they haven't
Right.
noticed? Oh, keep doing it. Oh, wait,
Just keep
a few of them noticed? Let them in, let them in, let them in.
social media. So social media was their worst enemy because they lost control of it. They thought they could manipulate it. They thought could use it. They got all their followers on it, and now it's out of control because there are other individuals who are spending more time trying to manipulate people than they are. There are people with bigger budgets to manipulate individuals, so it's a manipulation war.
Free for all. And the reason why I was bringing back to education the vote is because the factory, Congress, is populated by the people we put there. Yeah, they gerrymandered some of their seats and whatnot, but again, we kept putting them in power and they did it, and then we didn't do anything about them doing it. We probably didn't notice. I mean, I'm waiting for you to break in and be like, yeah, we were in the car, we were driving to work, we were dealing with healthcare, we were dealing with whatever, right? Worried about bills. We're trying to figure out how to make ends meet in the meantime.
Who could? If you're too busy, feeding your family, if you're so worried, and maybe if there's a pandemic going, let's just say that there is a global pandemic going on and the government hasn't given you support for 7 months, I'd imagine there's not much time to worry about anything else, right? So anyone who's an essential worker is still locked down in this system. And then there's another group of people who are no longer stuck in their car every day, but long to be stuck in their car because they don't know what the meaning of life is. They didn't know that they're supposed to do something intellectual with that time and not be stuck in traffic. And yes, you've got to raise your children. Sorry, I'll just say that.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that, yeah, I won't touch on that because I don't have kids, but I see where that goes. And it reminds me, you touched on that intellectual pursuits, and I was reading an article earlier today. It was so heartening because it was reaffirming. And I hate to say a march on the Capitol is reaffirming to anything. And that's not what I'm talking about, but that also proves it's like, oh, well, at least there's a wake-up call to Congress. But the article I was reading about was how during the pandemic, with people who have free time, they're finding a huge increase in the number of amateur astronomers and amateur scientists, all these people that are joining these studies that where crowdsourcing really helps collect the data or crunch the data or whatever it is. And it could be, searching for objects that are going to collide with Earth and kill everybody on it, to discovering or identifying new species or different species of certain bugs or insects or plants or animals. And it's amazing. It's fantastic. It's really heartening to see that if people were given, now, not to say that the struggle isn't real, right? But the idea that if people were free to pursue happiness, had free time to pursue intellectual things, to build knowledge, people do actually have an innate, insatiable curiosity to things. People aren't just going to sit around. Not everyone's going to sit around and play video games all day.
Some will.
And if you do for some period of time, so be it. But
Yeah.
just enjoy it. Whatever you're doing, just enjoy it. That's your freedom. That's your right.
Pursuit of happiness.
At the same time, you may take a few minutes off, or you take a break, or something happens that inspires you to go check out some app, and then you help find that asteroid. The 5 minutes, the 10 minutes, the first time, the only time, the fifth time you log on, you find that asteroid or whatever that prevents, helps us avoided or some catastrophe. You never know. That's the craziest thing about time and space in the universe.
And
Anyway,
myself being
go ahead.
a historian and a volunteering person, right? I just imagine
Yes,
the boom for that. If people were
huge.
able to focus, if so, we're talking about freeing people from the oppression, right, to live their best life. And if you free people to live, and I imagine in the museum community and the communities where we do a lot of this nurturing and interpretation, it's people are going to choose to do that. They'd rather give a tour of a museum all day, every day, and that's their life for the rest of their days. And they don't have to worry about health insurance. They don't have to worry about their basic income because it's taken care of. And then the nonprofits will flourish.
Yeah, it's a great segue. We were on a bit of a tangent there, but what we were edging into is the idea that there are freedoms, this whole freedom contract thing, and there are, I would say, three main categories I propose. Ray hasn't disagreed, and up to you all to push back or add to. But the three major tenets, or I would say planks, to this freedom contract platform are very simply stated as the freedom from oppression, the freedom from poverty, and the freedom from ignorance. And we're not going to have time to, delve into all of these today, but we are talking about freedom from oppression first up. And there's a freedom. I mean, oppression takes so many forms. I mean, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's overt. So we're going to try and isolate it to a few things. I mean, we're talking about the citizen's prerogative here and the republic in the United States. So just keep in mind that you can probably take these as very broad tenets and apply them to many more ideas. That's not our focus or our purpose here. So looking at the freedom from oppression, what does it mean? What does that mean to a citizen on the ground? Well, it means securing your vote first and foremost, because that is one of it's the source of your power. Also securing your free speech, and freedom from oppression involves lawmaking that works for humans in the republic, not necessarily companies, right? The companies already exist because they're returning some value, benefit, whatever it is. The laws are there for the people. So that's something we have to get made clear, because that's not clear in the rigged system we live in today. The other thing around freedom from oppression has to do with the contract in among one another, right? It's one thing to have freedom from a state, a government, an authority that could crush you. It's equally important to be free from oppression from a peer, an equal, someone in society. I'm not trying to say the government's above people, but it's more powerful generally than an individual. But when individuals go toe to toe, we should be free from the tyranny of one another. And so I kind of embody that message in Live and Let Live. We need to be able to live and let live among one another, your body, your life, your choice, to be free. And so we all have the choice for ourselves and our lives and our bodies to do what we want. That's our choice. That's our freedom. My freedom stops where someone else's begins, meaning, well, what they choose for their body, their life, that's their choice, as long as they are not infringing on my life. If they try and take my life, that's another story. Justice should be blind. Doesn't matter whether you're rich, you're poor, what religion you are, what you look like, anything like that. A crime is a crime is a crime. That's it. We all live under the same rules and laws, and if we break those rules and laws, we are all subject to the same penalties and exceptions. If there are exceptions, we make exceptions for murder, right? I think that's one of the commandments or something. Thou shalt not kill. Well, guess what? We make an exception for murder. We probably make a couple of exceptions, unfortunately. One is for self-defense. Apparently stand your ground somewhere gets mixed into it. So that's the other one that's a problem. That's a major issue. in the boundary, right, of live and let live. Digital access, data privacy, civil rights of ownership. Now, I haven't been hearing too much. I'm sure in digital areas, like in, the techie world, there's all probably going to be a flutter around soon, digital access and data privacy. But at the end of the day, what we're going to find out is the future of things like Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. The relationship we have with those should be very different, because the data should be ours and we should choose when and where and how they access it, much like a credit bureau is today, right? A company in general cannot pull certain types of credit information on people, without a reason. Now, I don't want to go too deep in credit bureaus because that's a schemy system in and of itself, and we can talk about that. We can have a whole separate discussion on the credit bureau situation, because basically they're the ones harvesting data on they're the original data harvesters. And your rights to it are so limited, right? It's only in recent days and years that they've started opening up access, because they started losing the data, right? They started getting breaches, and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're not so great, are we? So let's make sure you're more involved in how your data, how much is there, and whether it's right. I'd like to see all of that changed, whether it be credit bureaus, Facebook, etc. Your life, your data, it's your rights.
Well, if you need precedents, you've got the European Union, who's already spoken up in regards to where data rights stand. So we don't even need to argue if there's any precedents there, right? The European Union has spoken very clearly where data rights stand, and it just because we haven't caught up, right? Because it's our product, so the United States is less apt to attack its white people like it is to attack its companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there has to be a reckoning there. It's pretty bad, the way the harvesting has been happening.
And it's part of it. Free, and the thing is that is one step away from that data being used for bad, right? Or being used for for, for better, for the Capitol, the incident that happened at the Capitol, the fact that these individuals were so obsessed with using their phones, but we'll see how quickly the government can leverage these tools to corner and capture people, right? So it should be kind of it's impressive, this exercise that's going on, but it's also worrisome because they could do this anyways. This is where oppression can quickly come in from the government. And also, you have to ask yourself, hey, they can do this. So, what's the urgency when they attack citizens and other protests, right? If they can capture citizens later down the road and everyone's broadcasting this stuff on their Facebooks and social media because you're not doing something illegal, you're protesting. Well, the government doesn't have to act right then, they can act later. So there's another proof of concept where oppression seems to also be doled out by that whole, again, that, what did we say? The government running at you, right, as it seems fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're less likely to, that's an age-old way to go after your opponents. Like if, take it outside of our country, in another country where there's someone, trying to conduct a coup or something like that, they're going to be subversive in taking out their supporters or whatever it is, right? Slowly but surely, because if you do anything too obvious or too bold, it's going to cause a, response of almost equal stature. It's going to be curious to see how many failures, the root cause failures will be deep.
Yes. We haven't seen it yet, and it's probably confidential, I would imagine, for a multitude of reasons. But we're probably going to see that there were either systematic or personal failures, either because of systematic racism, because of our beliefs that the right wing is less violent, or that a mob of white people is less dangerous. I mean, tell that to Louis and his wife. But that just it's strange that there's this weird racist perception. So what's going to be interesting is the dissection, You're right, the post-mortem analysis of what happened on the Capitol. And it affected so many people, and the Democrats are in power, thankfully, so the questions will be asked because it was incited. Somebody somewhere dropped the ball. And you know what? I don't think it was one of those incidents where someone's like, I have a vengeful intent. Somebody, a
It was a crime
collection of
of
people.
opportunity. It was
Right.
a multitude of crimes of opportunity, I suspect as well. Yeah.
There
And there's
rose.
no I will be pleasantly surprised if there was some mastermind. I mean, I don't mean to
We
say
were
pleasantly surprised, but I mean I'll be like, wow, okay, so they did that. That's interesting. I
so
don't think that's it. Yeah.
I think we're going down to the fact of like, so this manipulation of people, right? So there was
Mhm.
no one that had ill intent, and I don't think anybody wanted them to storm the Capitol. That wasn't the intention of anyone that day. Maybe
Well,
those
there
individuals,
there were
but
some
not
groups,
no
some
organization. Yeah,
anti-government
right. No
groups. Yeah.
government organization, I
No.
mean. Right. So the active players in our government were just playing the game like they have, but they've played it harder than anyone else has ever, like all the way to the finish line. And
Yep.
that's what they saw. Because as Americans, we get intense at the finish line. So they not conceding, this is the opposite
Yeah.
reaction, right?
We rely
Every
too much on
action.
norms. We relied too much on norms, and this is how far you can stretch norms. This is the danger of norms
Mhm.
rather than rules
Or truth.
or truth. Well, oh, yeah. Well, we gotta get facts out there. It'll be interesting. We'll see where the facts land.
Well, here are the facts. Private property is something we'll continue to talk about when we talk about freedom of oppression, right? This breach on the Capitol, and it's a good place we're all going to be. The good news is that our work for season 2 is going to be much easier, Mike, because we get to talk to people about what happened at the Capitol as an example of a breach, right? Even
mm,
if you don't understand what's going on with Black Lives Matter or what's going on when people's homes are violated, we all can understand when was it too far on the Capitol building? When was it too far? When they breached the steps? Okay, you agree. If somebody runs up the steps of your house, you'd shoot them. That's your American dream. Great. That's your American truth. There's going to be a lot of calibration, folks, but I think we can all agree something happened that was wrong, and it warrants a discussion for quite some time. And it's always been wrong. Oops. It's always been wrong, but now it's it's a clear and present danger.
yeah, it really
And part
is.
of our oppression. Those people are oppressed. They are part of the same problem. So the same strife that we all are feeling, the same issue that we're all feeling here with this oppression, they're feeling it as well, just on an opposite side. And instead of seeking truth on their own, because they don't have the access that maybe we do in the cities, and they don't have the access that we do in the more, I don't know what to
It's
say,
not an
industrialized north.
access
Is
issue.
it
It's
not?
just knowing to
Please.
seek out the truth.
Some of the small towns, though, access, because when I'm up, even when I can only speak to my personal truth here, right? When I'm in northern
Well,
Arizona,
how are
I
they
can't
getting
get a
to the
good.
lies? However, they're getting to the lies, they're choosing the lies over the truths.
In
Because the
some
lies and
areas,
the
I'd
truths,
argue that
right?
Fox News might be the only
Mm.
broadcaster in the area,
Hmm.
right? So if you can only get your radio classic analog TV, and you're in a small town and
Well,
you don't have
Fox is
income,
cable only, so over the air is just local
but the Fox
stations.
affiliates are in the
Oh,
small towns.
well, and now whoever the other one is that's taking over all the local stations,
Right. So, and I guess this is the kind of stuff we look forward to pulling back, right?
Sinclair.
Because this is part of the oppression, the system that through companies and so, like Michael said very early on, right? Laws that are made for the public republic and for people, not companies. The laws that are in place have enabled these companies to gobble up local news companies. So now they're part of these conglomerate, subconglomerate that just eats their news from the Associated Press and the Fox Corporation talking points, frankly.
Well, yeah, at a macro level, the the rich people have built themselves a castle, and they have a bullhorn. And unfortunately, people don't
Foghorn.
really know. Yeah, they're not really digging deep enough to know who they should be listening to. And it's really unfortunate because you got a bunch of these trust fund babies who actually don't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
And now they're just trying to defend what they feel like is rightfully theirs, their inheritance. But it's not. They're not capable. And that's quite evident. And unfortunately, you've got people that are angry for valid reasons. Many of us are angry for valid reasons. They're just given a target to attack that is totally false.
And we're in human nature. We are curious. We want to find things out. We want to have the answer. We have to understand that we won't always have the answer. We won't always be right. We will sometimes lose. It's just what happens.
And we're not saying just because the Democrats are coming into power that somehow that fixes anything.
Oh God, no. It makes it worse in some ways.
I mean, the problem becomes now we're so distracted with fixing or whatever, like we're caught in that always, we got to push it back. We got to push it back. No time to think big, think correct, try and learn from the mistakes because the Democrats have mistakes to learn from here. If they keep saying the wrong thing, saying the right thing and doing the wrong thing, we're going to continue right down the path we've been on. We're going to have another Trump. Like this will only continue if people don't really wise up. If McConnell doesn't actually believe the words he espouses, and the same on the left. Like I think hopefully enough people, and we're just saying for Democrats because they're the freshest crew, they're generally the newest set of citizens to arrive in the House of Power. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of new people on the Republican side, but that's from Tea Party and some other stuff, right? So you've got this group of people that doesn't believe in facts, doesn't believe in science, wants to tear it down, wants to rule for the sake of ruling on one side. And then you have the other side that wants to try and, this is what I would argue, not everyone, but there's a group of people, moderates and on the left, who want to uphold the republic, the union, not the Confederacy, the union version of our republic. And then furthest to the left, you've got people who really want to try and pull in some new solutions to old problems, and they're getting labeled with everything under the sun. And I'm not saying all their ideas are great, but I don't think you throw them all away either. Right?
Well, no, you don't. And you don't label them with socialism. I'll continue to fight until I'm blue in the face. If I'm just waiting, I hope one day we get an interviewee and they want to talk about socialism because socialism's all around us. Socialism is the United States. The Hoover Dam is a wonder. Okay, but
I will tell you why we don't have capitalism today. We have we have corporate capitalism, which is corporate socialism in capitalist clothing.
We're oppressed. We're oppressed. We're all paying these taxes. Our citizens are paying these huge tax bills, and yet these companies exist as an individual and can seek a refund. And I'm sorry, but what have you done for me lately? Because I'm paying you through my taxes and I'm paying you through my checkbook, Amazon. That's what I feel.
So we're going to, during all of season two, I think we're dedicating to tuning up the Republic. We're going to be covering a lot of topics. Like this idea of freedom from oppression. Right now we're framing freedom from oppression. We're going to be talking a lot about the solutions to these items. And we're going to be doing it bit by bit, piece by piece. There's a lot of good ideas out there, and we want to start presenting them here. And we're going to present them in this set of planks, this framework, this platform is kind of the lens we're going to use to bring all those solutions forth. We're going to say, remember when we were talking about freedom from oppression, why we all deserve to have freedom from oppression, and that means making sure our vote, our free speech, etc. Well, we're going to be talking about what it takes to secure that vote.
In this journey, this journey is going to be done with you. We're not going to get there alone. Through your feedback and with interviews through you, our listeners, we're going to get to this together, because we are not the oracle. We do not live in an echo chamber. We're looking forward to having deep-rooted conversations with our fellow Americans. And we've already started. We've been doing practice interviews. So far, they've been a little bit more like a Banana Republic. And so we're working on it, though.
With that, we're going to go ahead and close out today's episode. For more information on this and other episodes, head over to citizendogood.com and click on podcast. While you're there, register to log in and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from the community. We have been your hosts. Thank you to Mr. Raymond Wong Jr.
And thank you to Mr. Piscitelli. It's truly been respectful of federal property today.
It's been something, that is for sure. And special thanks to you, our listeners. We save the best for last. You are the best and have been for years. Thank you for your support. We know it's painful and we love you. Intro music sampled from OK Class by Ozzy Jocks under Creative Commons license through freemusicarchive.org. Other music provided royalty-free through Fizzling Studios Inc.